Have you ever witnessed someone who loved deeply with all their sincerity and patience quietly walk away one day? No blame, no dramatic arguments, just a silent departure. Yet it causes the entire world of the other person to collapse. It's not merely the end of a relationship, it's the shattering of an illusion, a structure built on manipulation, blind sacrifice, and the desperate desire to heal someone else. In today's video, we're diving into a topic that's both profoundly human and incredibly raw. The moment a super empath, someone with intense emotional sensitivity and compassion, wakes up and walks away from a narcissistic partner. This is not just a story about leaving someone. It's a journey of reconnection with oneself, of breaking free from covert manipulation, and of reclaiming self-worth that was once silently distorted. Together, we'll explore why the moment a super empath leaves can hit like an emotional earthquake, and why their silence is often the most powerful declaration they'll ever make. If you're drawn to psychology, healing, and the path back to your authentic self, make sure to subscribe and watch this video until the very end. I truly believe that by the time it's over, you'll either recognize a part of yourself in this story or finally understand someone who once walked quietly out of your life. We often think of leaving a relationship as a spontaneous act, a moment of heated argument, a breaking point, the proverbial last straw. But for a super empath, walking away is never sudden. It is the culmination of a long journey, one where they loved deeply, waited patiently, held on to hope, and believed with all their heart that genuine love could reach and heal the wounded parts of the other person. Yet somewhere along that journey, a quiet question begins to echo in their mind. Why does loving this person hurt so much? And with that question, a silent revolution begins. In the next segment, we'll peel back the psychological layers, starting from their fierce belief in change, to the moment of heartbreak and disillusionment, and finally, to the quiet but powerful exit of someone who once loved with their whole soul. Listen closely, because sometimes a single moment of awakening can alter the entire course of a life. A super empath, a person with a vast heart and deep spirit, doesn't walk away because of temporary exhaustion. They don't wake up one morning and casually say, I can't do this anymore. No, they stayed, often too long, because they believed people could change. They believed that love, if pure enough, patient enough, forgiving enough, could reach beyond even the coldest defenses. They saw the potential in the narcissist, a flicker of light behind the mask of indifference. And they didn't just try to love, they tried to heal. From a therapeutic perspective, this belief isn't weakness, it's misdirected strength. It is moral courage, the kind that dares to love someone who doesn't know how to love back. But over time, something begins to shift. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, a question emerges. Why does this love hurt so much? And that question is the seed of awakening, because when a person starts to question, they also begin to step out of the old rule, the one where they always empathize, always justify, always blame themselves. From this point on, the super empath no longer merely feels, they begin to observe. They start to see the disconnect between words and actions, between sweet promises and the repetitive cycles of hurt. The mask begins to crack. And what once appeared as vulnerability in the narcissist is slowly revealed to be an intricate form of manipulation. From a therapeutic perspective, this moment is critical. This is when the client begins to separate themselves from emotional enmeshment and begins to reclaim agency. The truth is no longer hidden beneath compassion. It comes forth like a cold but necessary light. It hurts, but it also liberates. They begin to speak to themselves, not with blame, but with clarity. I once believed that love would be enough, but now I understand not everyone wants to be healed. And once they see the truth for what it is, they can never unsee it. Not because they're angry, but because they now know. And knowing is the first step to freedom. It's not coldness, it's not bitterness. In fact, they're still just as compassionate as before, but this time their compassion no longer flows outward indiscriminately. It turns inward and becomes an act of self-respect. They don't leave in anger. There's no need to scream, to argue, or to demand justice. They simply see clearly, and because they see clearly, they can no longer stay. In therapy, we call this a moral awakening of the inner self, when a person realizes that staying in a toxic relationship, even for reasons as noble as love, kindness, or empathy, is ultimately a betrayal of their own core values. And in this moment, the super empath realizes, I can love another, but I cannot betray myself to preserve a relationship. And so they begin to withdraw, not through dramatic gestures, but through quiet, consistent choices. No more justifying, no more clinging, no more blaming themselves. They return to the center of their being, where a gentle, unwavering voice speaks. It's time to stop. What's fascinating is this: that very calm is what sends the narcissist into chaos, because their power never came from who they were. It came from your confusion, your guilt, your emotions. But when the super empath becomes clear-eyed, they no longer react to the script. And it is in that stillness, in that peace, that the most powerful rejection is delivered. From a psychological lens, this is the moment when the person who once played the role of victim becomes the one who breaks the cycle of emotional manipulation. They are no longer there to heal someone else. They are there to heal themselves. And in that act, seemingly simple, like walking out of a room, not answering a message, or offering no final explanation, they reclaim their power. They don't need to win. They only need to be wholes, no longer defined by someone else's perception. And in that choice, something profound occurs. They don't just leave the narcissist, they walk toward true freedom. There is a hidden truth rarely discussed, yet it defines the outcome of every toxic relationship. And narcissists aren't truly afraid of abandonment. What they fear is being seen. And so when a super empath who once loved deeply, endured silently, and forgave endlessly, suddenly walks away in a state of awakened clarity, the narcissist world begins to crumble. No shouting, no drama, no cinematic goodbye, just nothing left to reflect their illusion. Because narcissists lack a stable inner self. They survive on external validation, clinging to roles: the victim, the misunderstood hero, the passionate lover. And who reflects those roles the most vividly? The super empath, the one who once believed in their potential, in the light they thought they saw within. While the empath stays, they're like a perfectly polished mirror, not only reflecting the narcissist's ideal self-image, but fueling the very illusion they live by. But when the empath walks away with that mirror in hand, what remains isn't longing, it's an unbearable emptiness. This moment is what psychologists call the collapse of the false self. The narcissist doesn't know who they are without someone else affirming that they're special, lovable, or important. They can't face themselves because they never learned to exist without using others as a backdrop. The silence of a super empath is not punishment. It is the absence of the one thing that made the narcissist feel real. Emotional feedback from another. And this is what they truly cannot bear. It's not the loss of a person. It's the loss of their illusion of self. At this point, the narcissist may react in a multitude of ways. They may jump headfirst into a new relationship with alarming speed, pull out the same old attention-seeking tactics, or attempt to lure the empath back with fake remorse. But it no longer works because the super empath knows the script all too well. And they're no longer playing a role in it. The empath has stepped out of the maze. But the narcissist, they're finally left alone in the dark room of their own psyche, the place they spent their whole life running from. In trauma recovery therapy, we call this moment the confrontation with the empty self. There is no reflection now, no fantasy to cling to, only a fragile, undeveloped identity, unstable and undefined. And here lies the brutal truth. They could use this moment as a chance to grow, but doing so would require humility, self-awareness, and courage. 3 things narcissists most often lack. Narcissists are addicted to emotional cycles. They cause pain, then wait. They wait for anger, for desperation, for any emotional reaction, because to them, any reaction is fuel for the empty self. But when a super empath walks away in total silence, no tears, no explanations, no need for closure. They strip the narcissist of the one thing they can't live without. In behavioral therapy, there's a vital distinction between the silence of the awakened and the silent treatment of the manipulator. The silent treatment is a weapon used by narcissists to confuse, punish, and make the other person beg to be let back in. But the silence of a healed empath is final. They are not silent to punish. They are silent because there is nothing left to say, nothing left to give, nothing left to lose. Psychologically, this is healthy emotional detachment. It's when someone who was once manipulated learns how to disengage from the narcissist's game of control. They are not fighting to be heard. They are pulling every drop of energy out of that system. And that, more than anything, leaves the narcissist stranded in the emptiness they once avoided. The narcissist doesn't truly fear abandonment. They've always been prepared to swap mirrors. What they truly fear is losing the one person who actually saw them and walked away, not for someone else, but for themselves. That is what makes the super empath's departure the greatest psychological blow the narcissist will ever endure. Because in that moment, there is no one left to blame, no excuses left to give, no story left to rewrite. The empath does not leave to find someone new. They leave to find themselves. And that is the narcissist's worst nightmare, as it cannot be interpreted as jealousy, competition, or revenge. It is a metaphysical exit, a kind of rejection that cannot be undone. I didn't choose someone else. I chose not to live in the lie anymore. That silence echoes in the narcissist's mind like a thunderclap. They were expecting a fight, a reaction, a familiar script, but what they receive is calm indifference, clear-eyed detachment. And to a narcissist, nothing is more terrifying than being no longer significant enough to stir emotion. In relationships governed by manipulation, where control and power dictate every interaction, there comes a moment when every tactic of the manipulator becomes utterly meaningless. That moment is when the super empath, those with deep sensitivity and an intuitive grasp of human nature, decides to step out of the web of entanglement. All the strategies, the lies, the carefully crafted performances meant to keep them tethered to the system fail. Because the super empath has done something subtle yet monumental. They've withdrawn their energy from the manipulative mechanism, not by winning, not by seeking revenge, but through one simple, powerful act. They choose not to participate. This refusal isn't impulsive. It's not an emotional outburst. It is the result of profound awareness, where the super empath sees the truth clearly. They no longer get pulled into the spiral of justifications, accusations, or desperate attempts to pull them back in. Instead, they choose to stand outside, not with cold indifference, but with what psychology calls healthy detachment. Indifference rooted in clarity. In this state, emotions are no longer driven by hatred or a desire to prove anything. Because even hatred, no matter how fierce, is still a tether, a way for the manipulator to stay present in the victim's mind. But when the super empath reaches authentic understanding, they no longer hate. They simply are not there anymore. This state is like a quiet river flowing through a chaotic forest. The river does not argue with the wind or fight the fallen branches. It flows, and in its flow, it carries freedom. The super empath, in their freedom, feels no need to prove they're stronger than the manipulator. They don't need a victory speech. They don't need a stage because they don't need to win over anyone. All they need is to live in truth. And that alone makes the manipulator unable to follow them into this new world. This brings us to a truth narcissists can't accept. I am no longer the center of their world. To a narcissist, the thought that someone could walk away without turning back, without fighting, without drama is a devastating shock. They were used to reactions. They're used to people getting sucked into the script. But when the super empath walks away, not out of fear, but from a place of profound liberation, the narcissist is left with a void they don't know how to face. In psychotherapy, we don't teach people how to win invisible wars, battles of ego and control. Instead, we help them recognize not every battle is worth fighting. Some wars only exist because we keep fueling them by reacting, arguing, or trying to fix what cannot be fixed. When a super empath reaches healthy emotional detachment, they realize the strongest response to manipulation is not confrontation, it's withdrawal. They leave the battlefield not in defeat, but in the realization that the battle was never theirs to begin with. And this withdrawal is not just a release for the empath. It's a profound blow to the narcissist's very identity, because narcissists need a mirror someone to reflect their image, someone to react, someone to feel. When the empath chooses freedom, they become an empty mirror, a mirror that no longer reflects pride, deception, or domination, only emptiness, which the narcissist is now forced to face. And that is their greatest fear. Not being seen, not having power, not existing in the eyes of someone else. The super empath's freedom isn't just about leaving a toxic relationship. It's about redefining themselves. They are no longer the victim, no longer the manipulated. They become someone who lives with honesty and clarity. They learn to set boundaries, not to punish others, but to protect their own peace. They learn to forgive, not because others deserve it, but because they no longer want to carry the weight of resentment. And most importantly, they learn to love themselves, not by comparing, not by proving, but by embracing who they truly are. On this journey, the super empath not only finds liberation, they inspire others. They become living proof that strength isn't in overpowering others, but in choosing to live aligned with one's own values. They show the world that manipulation only has power if we allow it to exist. And when we choose not to participate, when we choose freedom over entanglement, we don't just free ourselves, we begin a ripple effect that changes those around us. In the end, the story of the super empath is not one of revenge. It is not a story of domination. It is a story of healing, of coming back to oneself after deep wounds. It is the story of someone who has learned to walk forward with grace, unafraid, unchained, no longer held by invisible threads of the past. And in that freedom, they become a light, not to guide others, but to remind themselves that they have always been worthy of peace. So when the super empath walks away from the system of manipulation, they aren't just leaving a relationship. They are leaving behind an outdated version of themselves, one that was trapped in pain, control, and survival. They become a mirror, no longer reflecting manipulation, but reflecting truth. That freedom is not something taken from others. It is something you give to yourself.